And yes, Mayo ex-Mayo footballer even John Casey joins us here on our game. I suppose to look ahead to the final round of group games in the Mayo Senior Championship this weekend. And I suppose the news as well that broke last week that there's an opportunity for clubs in Mayo to get questions into senior manager James Horan for his end of season review later this month. So much going on in the Western County. John, how is all with yourself?
Everything good here, Jared, I have to say. Yeah, so it's, I suppose, nice to have a little bit of a club football to take our mind off what happened a couple of weeks ago. And certainly there's a lot of disappointment, bit of disillusionment around here. But generally, overall, the disappointment is of a grand scheme down here. But look at here, it's nice to get back. I think myself and everybody else heavily involved in loving our football has got into the club scene. And, it tends to kind of make you forget, I suppose, what happened. And it's a tough situation, I have to say. I've been there, done that, tried to play club games after losing All-Ireland finals shortly afterwards, and that's not a nice place for a club player to be, I have to add. Very, very difficult to represent your club, especially after the highs and the excitement, I suppose, and the potential of being All-Ireland champions, and then to have to go down, and I suppose folks that were patting you on the back a week previous in Croke Park, or they're on your back down in Belmullet or in Charlestown or Ahamore or Garrymore or wherever. So it is difficult for the players, and I felt for them the first week out there. It brought back horrible memories from myself from 25 years ago, trying to don a club jersey after the bitter disappointment of having lost an All-Ireland final. So there's a fella ringing me here, Jared, constantly.
No worries. It's just you frozen just there as well for a second.
You still? Sorry, Jared. There's a book. I don't know what's happened. This guy won't give up on me. Hello.
He must be doing his best to try and get in on the act as well.
Oh. He is. He's actually a guy I badly need to talk to. You wouldn't believe it. That's why he's probably trying to constantly ring me. But anyway.
No worries. We'll keep the show on.
Where do we start there now again?
Yeah. But just even, Mike, just continue on from what you were saying there as well. Just, of course, let you know we are going live here as well. So if you want to get any comments in as well, or any questions in for John, no worries. Well, just, Mike, continue on what you were saying there. Obviously, I can kind of still get from the sense of your talk and reaction that defeat in Croke Park nearly 5 weeks ago now, that the emotion and reaction in the county is still quite raw.
100%. I think I was one of those people that got caught up in the Mayo for Sam thing, and I thought I never would, but I tend to get swayed by other people's opinions rather than forming my own, which I never let happen really. But yeah, look, it was bitterly disappointment. There was no question there was a great chance for Mayo. I mean, we've been beaten by a brilliant Dublin team down the years in All-Ireland finals, and we really thought this was a great chance. But at the same time, Tyrone were obviously feeling the exact same thing. They had overturned Kerry in their semi-final. I think both teams felt there was a huge chance to win Sam Maguire on the back of Dublin not being in the final, and both teams would have felt it. But Tyrone took that chance, and Mayo unfortunately didn't, and played by anyone's standard very, very poorly. Got lots of things wrong. Just weren't up for the game, and you could nearly sense after a couple of minutes really that it was going to be a bad day all round. But look at here, as I mentioned earlier, look at the club football. The boys are back playing for their clubs now, so they'll have to get their, put the shoulders to the wheel, and a bit of pressure on them now to perform for their clubs, because that's what a lot of people will be looking at now, to see can they put in 5-star shows. And like anything, a county player is expected to play well for his club nearly every time he turns out.
Yeah, we've seen a lot, like the reaction as well the last kind of couple of weeks, saying, it's hard to see Mayo come back after this, because maybe, as you say, this was finally the view, not just from the county, but I think national kind of view, with Dublin not being there, and they've done the hard work and knocking out the 6-in-a-row champions. This was going to be final year. But you've seen it before. You touched on that final 25 years ago when you lost after replay to me, but you came back again the following year. We've seen it a lot as well during the last decade. This is relatively a new Mayo team, apart from maybe 5 or 6 players that don't have that kind of baggage of losing finals. I wouldn't rule it out, kind of Mayo, that the characters there, that they still have that desire and hunger to kind of bounce back. Do you still feel that, no, this team will still bounce back because the age profile is still pretty young, that like the likes of Oisin Mullins, Tommy Conroy, Ryan O'Donoghue's, just to name a few, have easily another 7 or 8, possibly 10 years left in the green and red jersey?
100%. There's fabulous talent there. There's no question. Mayo won't be far away again, to answer your question. They never will be. They've remarkable bounce back ability. I mean, no question. The belts they've taken down the years and the losses and the heartbreaking losses. This one 5 weeks ago wasn't heartbreaking. It was bitter disappointment. Few of the Dublin ones in times gone by would have been absolutely bitterly disappointing. 1 point losses. Was it the 16-1 scoring 2 own goals in the first half, keeping arguably one of the most prolific Dublin forward lines of all time scoreless for whatever was it, nearly 20-something minutes, then scoring 2 own goals to give Dublin a lifeline, losing that game by a point, losing replays by a point. This was one that wasn't in that category, Gerard, to be honest with you. It was more just disappointment at a non-performance. And to answer your question, Mayo certainly won't be far. Now, bear in mind, we don't know what format the championship is going to take next year. So that's a huge, massive. We won't even go down there. I'm still reading up on Proposal A and Proposal B and trying to see what I think would suit teams and players and bringing on players. I know if Tom Parsons was listening to me now, he'd want me shouting for Proposal B straight away as his new job and with the CEO of the GPA. But look at here, it's a tough situation to know, but in the current format, Mayo are not going to be far away. Connacht is slightly weaker with a certain number of teams, and I suppose this is the big argument as to what sort of levels of games you want to have, and I'm not going to go down that road now, but they won't be far away again. They certainly have too many good players to just drift away into the abyss, but they certainly will feel that there'll be a lot of work, a lot of soul searching to be done, a lot of regaining of confidence after what happened. But certainly, to answer your question, they definitely won't be far away next year.
Yeah, without even going into that can of worms of possible proposals for special congress, but just say if Proposal B is the one that does go ahead, that the GPA that players want, like 5 Division 1 teams are going to make the knockout stages. Like you'd fancy Mayo definitely won't be far away from finishing in the top 5 in the league. I know they've been up and down the league the last kind of couple of years. Just maybe the last thing on the county side of things before we get into the club championship, because we touched on off here, there's a lot of eating and drinking in the Mayo Club Championship possibly this weekend. Just that proposal that we've seen from the Mayo News had an article on it last week that it's up, clubs can get kind of questions in for James Horan before his end of season review before the end of this month, and you kind of touched on it there that like there is kind of a lot of kind of questions that have to be answered in Mayo, a couple decision makings. I even kind of felt, and I watched the game back as well a day or two later as a neutral watching it, that I particularly found his decision to take off Porrick O'Hora was a strange one, considering he was breaking quite even, and Darren McCurry at the time, he just won 2 frees that led to 2 scores. McCurry then kind of went to town with 1-1 afterwards. Do you still kind of feel that this is maybe not a bad idea, that people can kind of get their questions out there and kind of maybe get a better idea of what happened on the day?
Sounds like you're applying for that Mayo job there, Ger, with you got all your tactics probably spot on, but it's probably certainly an unusual set of circumstances. I don't know, has any county ever had that policy before that clubs were allowed to submit questions and ask questions and whatnot, but it certainly is a novel way to go about things. And I think last Friday was the deadline from what I gather. I didn't ask my club to submit any questions on my behalf, although you probably have a few. But yeah, there was a couple of little things like that. Like Porrick O'Hora's probably just as big as contribution was just before he got taken off. He actually had a barnstorming run out of defence, chipped a tackle, got fouled, and then all of a sudden I went, oh God, he must have been picked up an injury or something must have happened in that tackle. So, I mean, if they're the types of questions that are to be asked, then I don't know, is it really the right way to go? But I think the big question that everybody wants to know answers to down here and probably the country over is we're hearing rumours, and rumours are rife about disharmony amongst the Mayo management team, and that's, look at, I don't know whether they went during the game, whether or not there was differences between Kieran MacDonald and James Horan. I have no idea, because I spent most of the second half with my head in my hands, if I'm frankly honest, and I didn't notice it right down in front of me in front of the Mayo dugout. But they're probably the real questions that people want to know. And I know Liam Moffat, who's announced that he's going to be our outgoing chairman, has dispelled any form of any rift amongst management players, but certainly Kieran MacDonald was sitting in the stand at the end there. I think after Matty Ruan picked up his red card, Kieran Mack was sitting in the stand, and and got a high five. Kieran Mack gave Matty a high five after he got red carded. But I don't know what happened down on pitch level. But I'd imagine if clubs or certain people within clubs want answers, that'll be certainly one of the big questions asked.
Yeah, I think there was strong rumours about that. All right, that Kieran McDonald was, going to depart the Mayo backroom team not long after the final. They kind of seem to have been pretty much dismissed, and even on Pork O'Hara, another thing that was mentioned there about maybe showing my fan club for Pork O'Hara, I think he actually dispossessed Matty Donny as well, that started the move for Tommy Conroy's glorious goal chance. So probably even adds to the baffling of his decision. I don't know now about your earlier point about me possibly applying for Mayo job, how that would go down as a West Roscommon man, but we'll quickly move on to Mayo Club Championship and avoid any...
You're not cousins with Porrick O'Hara by any chance, are you? No?
No, I'm not, no. But after watching him on the field of play on Ultimate Hill week last week, he's not a man that wants to get on the wrong side of anyway, that's for
absolutely
certain.
Not. And me either.
No. And speaking of that as well, Club Championship, of course, this weekend, we touched on it there a little bit off air. I suppose your own club, Charlestown, are obviously probably involved in one of the most high-profile games this weekend, because a victory for them could see them knock out reigning champions Knockmore, which would have seemed unthinkable. They made such a dream start, beating Moore in the first game. I think they were 9 points up at half time. Fell a little bit asleep in the second half, but still seeing it out by 6 points. But I don't think anyone's seen, as we all know how difficult of a place it probably is to go to Belmullet, but I don't think anyone's seen that defeat coming 2 weeks ago.
That's been the real cat amongst the pigeons. It's not the ideal situation. I actually watched the Charlestown Belmullet game in Charlestown here in the company of Ray Dempsey. They were after winning the night previous against Moore. He actually told me that he was very nervous as a manager. He said first time he was ever nervous was he didn't know how his team were going to handle as trying to retain a title or play as champions. So they got off to a great start against Moore. I heard they were absolutely brilliant. Did take their foot off the gas. I heard they played unbelievable football. A clubmate of mine that was at the game told me that. So Charlestown played Belmullet on that day that I was at the game with Ray Dempsey here. The first round, Charlestown arguably could have won the game after conceding 2 goals. I have to say Ryan O'Donoghue was brilliant in that game. So was Owen O'Donoghue, who didn't get much game time for Mayo this year. They were superb in that game against Charlestown, but Charlestown did put in a really strong second half and were probably unlucky. A bit of poor shooting cost them the game. Charlestown had a belter of a game against Moore the last in round 2, and Moore were 11 points up, home and hose, conceded 3-3 in a row, went a point behind, had a man sent off, looked dead and buried, and miraculously scored the last 3 points of the game to win by 2. That was a great result for Charlestown in the grand scheme of things. But there's my phone ringing again.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. That was a great turnaround from Charlestown. They've done really, really well to come back from that, I suppose, with the 14 men. But the one that you mentioned there, everybody expected Knockmore to turn over Belmullet away from home. It doesn't matter where it is. It's a very, very difficult place to go, Belmullet. But I have to say, when I was after leaving, I was actually at the Westport Castlebar Mitchell's match over in Castlebar, and I was leaving that. It was a pretty drab affair, and I was just talking about the, Knockmore probably having won below in Belmullet, and my phone rang, and it was Colin Gannon, the editor of the Mayo Advertiser, sports editor. He says, "You're not going to believe what happened." And I said, "Don't tell me Castlebar Mitchell's got a late goal." He says, "Worse for you." He said, "Knockmore after beating Belmullet at home." Knockmore after losing to Belmullet, and I went, "Oh my God." So it's left Charlestown in not a nice place, having to beat the county champions, or a draw, believe it or not, will do Charlestown. But I don't think it's a place Ray Dempsey or anybody envisaged Knockmore having to win their last game. I think they probably expected to be home and hosed at this stage, and maybe using the Charlestown game to try out a player or two, use a player or two. But it's certainly not a place we want to be. But look at here, sometimes you've got to take out the best to progress, and Charlestown have been in the wilderness a little bit in the last number of years after being very, very strong there when in the 90s and early noughties, and we're just very, very strong, and then all of a sudden we've drifted away. And it's 8 years actually since we've got out of a group in senior championship, so it's time to put that right. We could have an easier task, I suppose, than against the county champions, but Knockmore hadn't been playing great, although they were very good in the first game against Moore. They've had an indifferent year, and that's champions are entitled to do that. But I think you're going to see a different Knockmore team against Charlestown. Of course, the game is on in Brafey at 4 p.m. on Saturday. But our fellas Charlestown, that is, are capable. There's no question they're capable. If they can stay focused for the entirety of the contest, they have a couple of great young lads, a couple of that'll play robust forwards up there that aren't afraid of anything. And if things go their way, we could have a real battle here. And we're just hoping, I suppose, from a Charlestown point of view, that Knockmore maybe don't bring their A game, but when Knockmore open up, I mean, you saw it last year through the championship. They're explosive and they're very good and very deserving county champions. So, yeah, if that game goes to the wire, it's going to be really exciting. It probably will. I'm just hoping Charlestown, as I mentioned there earlier, Jared, Charlestown play for the entirety of the game and maybe make Knockmore sweat. And, as champions, defending champions, then you could get, greasy palms or drop a ball here and there. You're thinking something could happen. So, yeah, definitely it's one of the games of the weekend here in Mayo.
Yeah, we were just saying there off air before we went on that you're going to need the calculators out this weekend in the Mayo Club Championship. And there is actually a possibility as well. Charlestown could still go through, but they would need Belmullet to lose to Knockmore, who are already in the relegation playoffs. So the likelihood that happening is probably quite slim. I suppose when you think of Charlestown from a national point of view, everyone would obviously think of Tom Parsons, who just hung up the boots last year with Mayo. But one player, I think I remember watching him last year against Westport in the group stages who caught my eye was Paul Towie, and he was someone that was kind of talked up, but was going to get a bit more game time after Keegan O'Connor got his injury against Clare. He was actually the player that replaced him that day in Ennis, but never really got to see much more of him. I don't know if he actually came on any championship game this year.
He did.
What's his kind of form line like at the moment with Charlestown?
Yeah, look, he's got great potential, really great potential. Now, I was at the game. I was at both the Charlestown games, and of course he's a marked man now at this stage. And we thought he was going to set the championship, inter-county championship, alight this year. He played very, very well for the Mayo under-20s last year in Castlebar against Galway, who ended up being All-Ireland champions. He scored 9 points that day for Mayo under-20s in one of the most horrendous conditions for football imaginable. He showed great potential. Things haven't worked out well from after Killian got injured. I was at that game actually in Ennis when Killian picked up that injury and Paul Towie came on. I think he ended up scoring 3, 1 from playing 2 frees that day, and it looked like he was earmarked to take over the reins from that. So he did actually make his debut this year, but he's got very little game time. Now, I'm not here to question any manager, and because I just don't know, but he wasn't being considered for pretty much any game. He didn't make the 26 for semi-final or final, so he obviously ended up being way down the pecking order for James Horan, Jared. So, I mean, that's something that Paul, as a player, will probably have to address. I don't know what happened inside, but in the camp, but he certainly has potential to do damage to any team. And and not just him, we've a couple of lovely forwards. We've 2 Linehan brothers there that were absolutely on fire unmarkable against Knockmore. I had people in the shop to me today going, do you think will they be getting called up for Mayo? And anything is possible. These lads don't play with a care in the world. And, and Towie is a good foil for them. Towie will kick the frees. He works hard and he's very, very accurate. So we will need him to play really, really well against Knockmore. As in we will all our forwards. So I don't know what for his future may hold in inter-county. He'll probably have to work really hard. I think the current inter-county forward, it's just not good enough. If you're able to score, you've got to bring a lot more to the game. It's all about tracking, turnovers, tackle counts, where you are, possession, keeping the ball, and nearly some players, I think, when they get a county jersey on, they're almost afraid to take shots on and stuff in case they miss because their stats won't read well. So, look, we'll have to wait and see. There's a long way to go. Hopefully, from a Charlestown point of view, they have another couple of games in the championship. But certainly, for us to have a chance against Knockmore on Saturday evening, we need Towie to bring his A game with him.
Yeah, strong showing there. Obviously, would, as you say, hopefully get Charlestown to knockout stages for the first time in 8 years. And I think as well, Charlestown spent a year or two down intermediate as well, so it has been kind of a roller coaster since they last won the county championship in 2009. The other big game that kind of stands out this weekend in Mayo from a winner takes all point of view is the meeting in Group 3 of Castlebar and Bannadreen under lights on Friday night. 2 teams that were both tasted glory in the last 10 years. I think Bannadreen actually got to the final in 2019. Castlebar, we know, have got as far as Croke Park on St. Patrick's Day. But It probably was when the fixtures were drawn up, start of this group. Westport, with exciting young team, really expect to kick on, have topped this group as expected. This probably was going to be seen as always going to be who was going to decide second place.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, Bal, their first time back in senior in a long time, got the short straw, the group from hell, really, if you want to call it that. I mean, Westport, Castlebar, Mitchells, Ballahadreen, very difficult to pull anything apart from them on paper. Westport have all their hard work done, so they can sit back and smoke their cigars this weekend. Castlebar, Mitchells and Ballahadreen. I was at the Westport, and I mentioned the Westport and Castlebar Mitchells game. I was at that game, Jared, and I wasn't very impressed with Castlebar, I have to say. When you look through their lineup, and I've been at Castlebar Mitchells and covering them for radio all down the years, and I nearly found myself a massive fan of them because I just loved watching them playing football. They had a brilliant mixture of players across but they don't seem to be playing with that confidence or that they had before. And players have got a little bit older, of course. They've lost a couple of players, the two Feeney brothers, for example, but they've certainly on paper they've got a really strong looking team. But the big players didn't show up for them against Westport. They really didn't. Donald Vaughan, of course, who transferred from Ballinrobe to Castlebar Mitchells, hasn't really done a whole pile for the Mitchells. He will certainly need to be on top of his game again. Danny Kirby, of course, who you'd be familiar with, James Durkin, all these fellas really didn't stand out and be noticed against Westport. And James Durkin, another one. They're lads that have to play well. And the other, probably the best Castlebar Mitchells, most consistent Castlebar Mitchells player over the last 10 years has been Neil Douglas. Prolific forward at club level, absolutely brilliant. He scored some of the most unbelievable goals and points down the years against Ballintubber in finals, against Currafin in Connacht finals. Brilliant player. Lee Keegan picked him up the last day, and Lee was waltzing around Josie Munley Park like he hadn't a care in the world, like he didn't care what was happening. Just, he said, if as long as I keep Dougie away from the ball, we'll probably win the game. And he done that very effectively, I have to say. But yeah, Ballahadreen, on the other hand, of course, have an absolutely abundance of talent as well. The big problem for Ballahadreen, however, is they're missing three huge players for them. Keane Handy is out injured. David McBride, who got game time with Mayo this year, played against Galway in the league, out injured, and David Drake, of course, who has played with Mayo. Like, you're losing your fullback, or your centre back, your fullback, and your midfielder. Like, club team, you still look at Ballahadreen very strong. Andy, of course, is there, the outlet. Andy Moran is still, of course, doing as good as ever. Shiroz Akram in the middle of the field, very strong. Seamus Caniff, former Mayo under-21 winning fullback. They have a really good nucleus of a team there. But I was actually doing my piece for the paper on Friday, and I was going tipping Ballahadreen until I realised those three players are probably not going to be playing. So that, for me, sways the balance for Castlebar Mitchells. As bad as Castlebar Mitchells were against Westport, I don't think that I see Westport have the players to nullify the Castlebar Mitchells. I don't know if Ballahadreen, with them lads missing, will do the same. So still, it's a game I'm going to. Can't wait to go to it. Something's going to give there. You're going to have one of the, I suppose, pre-championship favourites bowing out on Friday evening in Knockmore.
Yeah, I suppose you touched on there with Ballindreen. Andy Moran has hinted this is probably going to be his last year playing at 38. He's now moving on to the next stage in GAA and stepping into the world of management, taking over Leitrim next year. It's a good one, I suppose, for him to kind of dip his toes into county management. I suppose for Leitrim to be getting a player that will bring very, very strong kind of professionalism and high standards.
Well, you said it there in a nutshell. If Leitrim can even get 1% of his infectious personality or anything of his characteristics from him, they'll be in a better place for it. Dipping your toes is probably, Andy probably wouldn't want to hear us describing it as dipping his toes. I'm sure it's a very, very serious job for him. Yeah. His first he's not one of these guys to sit back and, he probably could have easily had a punditry role for the next couple of years, but he wants to get stuck into it. But every time you meet Andy Moran, you just leave with something from him, like his infectious personality and the way, his enthusiasm, for want of a better word, and the way he just goes about things. Like, you don't ever imagine to see him angry or mad, although I have done a couple of times on the playing field when I got the wrong side of him. But other than that, he'd certainly bring a renewed hope to Leitrim. And if he does retire, I don't imagine he'll be able to play for Ballahadreen as well as manage Leitrim next year. But certainly it is a big move for Leitrim. And look at here, it's a stepping stone for Andy to who knows what, maybe down the line. He is looking at the Mayo job.
Yeah, it's no bad place to start off, and who knows with the new proposed ball, and he could be facing 11 games next year, which is brilliant. I suppose he'll get plenty of experience, and he actually is in I think a player kind of management kind of coach role with Ballynareen this year. Just looking at the rest of kind of the groups, obviously Westport, the other team in that group, they're already safely through top spot. Lee Keegan just been nominated for Player of the Year, so things going well there. For then, Group 1 is one of them groups. Ballintubber, with their scoring averages, they should be as good as true. They play Clare Morris this weekend, who need to win that game. You've Ballina, know that if they win against Davids, who still are in with a small chance, but scoring difference isn't in their favour. They probably should go through. You got Gary Moore versus Brafey. That's pretty much the side who'll finish top spot. Two teams that will have aspirations of going deep in that championship. And just checking the last game of that group, then Kiltane and the Neil, that'll decide who'll end up in the relegation playoff. Just off them other kind of sides, the likes of Ballintubber, Ballina, Westport, Brafey, all sides that will have aspirations of being number one come the end of the championship. Who do you think is most likely to follow in that footsteps, or who so far has caught your eye the most?
Yeah, I'd be interested to see. Well, it's no more than the Mayo scenario, Jared. We'll see how Ballintubber will cope without Killian in the knockout stages. Really, he's really the key. Like, of course, they've still got a huge talent. They've got Michael Plunkett, Jeremy, of course, Jason Gibbons is still lording it in the middle of the field for his club, still playing great stuff for his club, and Brian Walsh there. They've loads of experience, piles of county medals within their ranks, but there's only one Killian O'Connor really when it comes to score getting, and they won't miss him. Probably they won't miss him maybe quarter final, but certainly when you get to the knockout stages, you'd be wanting him on your side. Ballina, another team, they're playing against Davids, a team that have loads and loads of talent in their ranks. Of course, you mentioned there your favourite Mayo player, Pádraig O'Hora, of course, Swanee, Clarkey in goal, David Clark, who went off injured in their last game, and then you have David Brady's nephew, actually Dylan Thornton, playing midfield for them now, and believe it or not, Kevin McStay's nephew, Conor McStay, playing corner forward. So there's great pedigree there. Then you have the likes of Kevin Newell there, who top scored for them the last day. So, and of course, former Mayo player, now Mayo nutritionist Evan Regan is still there, banging away. So they've got huge talent as well, Ballina. So you'll fully expect them to get the better of Davids. And if they do, they're safely through, providing there's no other silly results. So there is a lot of you nearly need to take the calculators out and take out your degree in rocket science to try and figure out all the different scenarios and permutations. But you certainly would expect Ballina to join Ballintubber out of that group. Who was the other ones there? You mentioned Gary Moore and Brafey is a shootout. Gary Moore playing very, very well, I have to say. They've got Inda Vardy, of course, back from St. Vincent's. Very, very good impact sub. And then, of course, young player Enda Hessian, who's made a great start to his Mayo career. So then, of course, Brafey, the bridesmaids, will this be their year? A lot of people are tipping them every year. So the fact that they're through already, they'll be able to. But they've got a couple of big. They've got a couple. There's my phone ringing again, right on cue, Jared.
We're nearly finished up anyway, so you can.
All right, it's the same fella ringing me all the time too.
He mustn't be watching this.
Sorry, we're back again. So. I know. Well, he's not watching it. Yeah. So of course, but you can't rule out county champions Knockmore either. Of course, so it's awful hard to call. Like, if you were to ask me to pick a winner right now, I'm finding that very, very difficult. Like, I would have said Westport on the back of them being very comfortable. I'd have said Westport on the back of them being very, very comfortable. And getting out of the groups, but still, their game against Castlebar Mitchells was a bit of a war of attrition, so I find it hard to call. I'm waiting to see. The teams. Not Ballintubber. You put me on a spot here. Like, I couldn't honestly pick a winner. If I was to put my head on the block, I'm going to say, even though they've never won it before, I don't think Westport, with the array of talent they have. They work so hard. They've got Lee Keegan, Rory Brickington. They've got Fionn McDonough, who was very, very good. midfield against Castlebar the last day. Shane Scott, another big man, and then you have the likes of, we haven't seen him. I think he's been carrying an injury. Mark Moran was being involved with the Mayo setup as well. So yeah, they could be kind of I don't know if you'd even call them an outside bet at this stage, but very, very difficult to call. But we could have one surprise over the weekend. There could be a big gun gone. Of course, I'm hoping that big gun is going to be Knockmore. So we'll have to just wait and see what happens.
Yeah, I think the fact that you were saying there, even though you're putting a spot that like you named up 5 or 6 teams and you couldn't make your mind up, I think it does genuinely sum up like the national view that like the Mayo Club Championship is just one of the strongest and most competitive. And you even look at the fact as well now that the Connacht Club Championships in our Ireland series going back this year, even intermediate junior level, Mayo teams are always winning them at Connacht level, always there at that stage at Ireland. It's probably no wonder why the factors are so strong in county level. The club scene does seem to be kind of going really strongly there. Just maybe one last point before we finish up with you, because you've been very good with your time, and I know that you have another call to take care of. Just last week, we've seen Lee Keegan was nominated for Football of the Year. Obviously, 8 Mayo players in general nominated for All-Star, but he was their sole nominee for Football of the Year. I was chatting to Cottle Craig last week, who would have had a lot of individual battles down through the years. He said he's probably definitely the toughest player he's come across. For you, where does Lee rank in the all-time greats to play for Mayo?
Very simple. Lee Keegan cemented himself as Mayo's greatest ever player after this year. Absolutely no question. I would have held quite a number of my own teammates and would say teams from 89 and very highly. We weren't as lucky. There was no back doors for us back then. It was losing your out. So Mayo, the current Mayo, get much more games. I would have had a huge amount of players from this current setup up there. Keith Higgins, Keegan, Andy Moran, brilliant players all round. But I just think what he done this year, Gerard, has cemented he's guaranteed his 5th All-Star. I mean, will he get Player of the Year? I don't know. Probably not, because either Myler or McGarry will probably get it as being All-Ireland champions. But he certainly has been. And the funny part about it is, like, he had to be persuaded to play football, that's the part that makes it hilarious. Like, he was more of a rugby head by all accounts, and he just played. I've met him a load of times, and he just plays with such randomness, and he doesn't sweat it, he doesn't fret it. And the pictures I think you see Lee Keegan down the years are absolutely. Cathal Craig would obviously know well about it. He seems to be laughing his way through a match, like, which is unbelievable. Like, he plays just off the cuff. And then when he gets motoring, boy, or he gets going, but if he gets the some of the battles he's had down the years have been box office, like Inda Smith, Sean Kavanagh, Diarmuid Connolly. Even Daft last weekend in the club championship, he knew he had to do a job on Neil Douglas, like the biggest threat on the opponent's team, and he just goes out and does it without breaking a sweat. He's such a good player, and your question is answered quite simple: the best ever.
Didn't actually know that about his rugby background. You don't know what kind of maybe persuaded him to keep him going down the route of GAA, because obviously we've seen a lot in the past. Players have had strong interests or strong talents about Gaelic and rugby. They've gone down the rugby route probably because of professionalism. So Lee kind of seems to be a bit of an outsider that way to stick with the GAA.
Yeah, I think it was rugby, because Westport would be a fairly strong rugby town, all right. But I know he didn't play. I don't think Lee Keegan played underage football for Mayo and he just grew into games, and the Mayo faithful fell in love with him very, very easily, because he just played with his big happy head on him the whole time. And then when we saw him going at his crack in Croke Park with Diarmuid Connolly or whoever, like, you knew if you were the opponent's best player, you knew you were getting Lee Keegan the following day out, like, and that was the way that Mayo set up with him, and all managers. But he's a remarkable talent, absolutely unbelievable footballer.
So there you have a brilliant exclusive here on our game, and one of the greatest footballers currently playing the game. And of course, remember, you can get more great our game content, of course, by subscribing even to our Patreon. It's only for €5 a month. We get all audio content and more exclusive content. And of course, don't forget as well, if you haven't already, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can just do it there at the bottom right of the screen. We're just shy of 9,000 subscribers. It'd be brilliant to kind of get up to that mark and even push them towards the 10,000 mark. John, thanks very much for your time this evening, and hopefully we'll get to chat again this side of Christmas about more club football.
Thanks a million, Jared. Talk to you.
Cheers, John.